Hello and welcome to the Sales Leaders series. I'm your host, Freddie, where I'll be gathering B2B SaaS sales leaders from across the world to answer 5 short, topical B2B SaaS sales questions. These questions are going to be the same each week, bar one, giving you insight and different perspectives into how top performers within the industry think, as well as actionable advice you guys can use in your own selling careers. Today, I'm joined by Bridget Harris. Before starting YouCanBookMe and entering into the world of SaaS, Bridget worked in various roles within politics and British Parliament. After almost 15 years working with different parliamentary parties, offices, councils, Bridget started her first SaaS company, YouCanBookMe, one of the first calendar-based scheduling tools in the market. As co-founder and CEO, Bridget has scaled her business to over 5 million ARR and growing. Now the business is globally recognized and trusted by over 22,000 companies within 100 different countries. Alongside YouCanBookMe, Bridget is a well-recognized industry thought leader and expert, specifically on bootstrapping, profit share schemes, building sustainable revenue, and a global team. You also might have recognized her and spot her from spreading expertise at events such as SaaS Stock, SaaS Open, and on other channels, including LinkedIn. We'll have some links in the description for all of those different bits and bobs. Bridget, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
You're very welcome, Freddie. Thank you for asking me on.
Now, all of the kind of ways in which I thought we could start this conversation, of which there was many things that I wanted to ask you. I think one of the most interesting places that we could start, and for those listening, we might jump around in the chronological order of all of these different questions, but specifically looking at your background in politics. It's a very interesting and varied background, especially being in SaaS, and a unique one. And with respect to that time of your life, what skill or learning, if you had to pick one, has had the biggest impact in helping you build and scale YouCanBookMe that came out of those years?
It's quite hard to identify one because it was hugely transformative in terms of what you learn. If you work inside politics, you learn because working in a political environment, lots of people are doing lots of very different jobs. So you can see the power of strategy, leadership, but also campaigning, implementation, communication, policy. And in many ways, the political process mirrors a startup in many ways. You know, you're trying to get voters, you're trying to get users. It's actually a lot of similar kind of things. You're a campaigner, you're a marketer, you know, you're a strategist in both. So there was a lot of transferable skills that came with me to when we started building YouCanBookMe. I think that I would say, and this is just the most important thing really in any business and any organization, is culture. It's the importance of culture. And the reason why is because if you purposefully and proactively decide what your culture is going to tolerate, what it's going to promote, and what it's not going to tolerate, you then attract the right kind of people to work with you on that journey. And we've been very, very blessed with many incredible people who still work with us to this day, but also people have come and gone who have shared our core values, shared what we're trying to achieve, shared our same approach to customers and to the business. And you only do that through culture. That's not accidental. And I think that inside the political environment in Parliament, you actually there's no friendships in Parliament. There's no friendships inside politics. Everybody's trying to achieve something, and there's alliances. You know, there's not true connections. There's alliances. There's tribalism. There's people who all believe in the same flag, whether it's a yellow flag or a red flag or a blue flag. But you know, I think anybody from the outside can see this self-evidently, that political parties and the political process and government work according to some quite cynical transactional trade-offs. And because of that, you get a very toxic culture, I would say. So I saw that over many years working in Westminster, that all the relationships were largely transactional, right, largely functional. There's no love or gain inside those relationships. Now, I'm not saying that running a startup, we're some kind of big cuddly family, because that's also not correct. But what you can do is build up a culture of deep shared values and respect. And I think it was something that I was determined to do when I started YouCanBookMe, to build the company that culturally I thought was something I could be proud of, where people were treated with respect, and we could do a joint endeavor, which is in our case, an online scheduling tool, that we could have a shared mission and shared values around that. And I think in politics, what I saw is too many times people falling apart and disagreeing because of tribalism or because of political capital. And it's just not healthy for people. It's just not a healthy environment. And I didn't want to work in that environment. So it's less about, how to build a more successful business and more about what did I learn that I didn't want to repeat inside YouCanBookMe.
Makes a lot of sense. And I know that you've been a fully remote team at YouCanBookMe,
Yes.
and I can imagine there has been some challenges with at least building that culture all remote and digitally. Does that put emphasis on particularly the hiring process for you? Or, I mean, how have you kind of managed and built that culture within a digital environment?
So absolutely, you're completely right. Being remote isn't better or worse than anything else. It has its own challenges. It has its own advantages. So again, culturally, you have to be aligned to the fact that you're going to work remotely, which changes. I mean, actually, given the fact that you can hire anybody in the world, if you like, having some boundaries are really good. Like, well, we can cut out the people that want to work in an office. Great. They might be great people, but we're only hiring people that want to work remotely. So you work with the constraints of remote culture. And I think that, a few years ago, Freddie, I used to talk about remote culture all the time because it was unusual for a company like ours to be remote. Now, because of the pandemic, everybody's worked at home. Everybody is used to it. It's completely changed the way that we, as you said, in a digital landscape, now we're all operating very happily in remote ways. Whereas literally 5 years ago, we were sort of constantly being asked, just, how freaky were we to want to be remote? And it was a very small community, and now it's just totally mainstream. So it's good for us. In terms of the cultural things, this is the case in bricks and mortar offices as well, but it's even more true for remote companies, is communication. And we've definitely fallen foul of forgetting that lesson sometimes. But basically, in remote companies, you need to communicate, you need to over communicate, you need to check that you have communicated and everybody knows. And then every so often, and we've just come back from France, in the south of France, we had an all week company retreat, or we call them summits. We had a summit in France. You cannot ignore the fact that people have to get together. They want to socialize. We did karaoke. We went on a sailboat. You have to do things together as human beings because they want to assemble. They want to get together. And there's lots and lots of ways of collaborating and communicating that you can only do face to face as a group. That is very hard over Zoom, especially if you've got an international team. And so I so fully respect the fact that 75% of our company is speaking English as a second language. So they're operating in a remote environment, not even in their own native language. So we have a lot of privilege in the way that we're doing things in English. So communication becomes a really important thing. And that was the hardest during lockdown because we couldn't have those face-to-face meetups. And obviously people were very isolated in their houses. So there was a tendency to work too many hours. So you actually have to kind of consciously police work-life balance, people clocking off. People are not expected to be on Slack all the time. These are the kind of things which you'd think are very micromanaging to be telling people to switch off Slack, but actually you have to tell people, take holidays, delete the app, ignore your notifications, you're on holiday, because if you don't, you're running a 365-day work experience and you can't turn off. So those are the things that I would say as a remote company, we've had to proactively take care of our culture because of.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're going to change focus here for the next question. And thinking about YouCanBookMe's scaling process specifically over the last 12 years, and the sales process and go-to-market function.
Yes.
What was the tipping point for you that made you realize, okay, we really have something here?
Well, easy. Customers paying you money. I mean, like super easy. But sorry, Gary, finish your question first.
No, and yeah, I mean, you're right. And on top of this, kind of where do you see YouCanBookMe in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay.
And tied onto that, how do you think go-to-market strategies in how you sell will change over that period too?
So yeah, it's very easy for us because this is not the first scheduling tool that we built. So we actually have another scheduling tool called When Is Good that does aggregate scheduling. So it's finding a time for a group of people to meet. And we had that. We built that in 2007. And the the experience of going from a freemium, fast-growing tool that didn't have customers to a scheduling tool, as you said at the beginning, we were one of the first calendar-based scheduling tools. I think we were the first calendar-based scheduling tool out there. Um, Meant that when people saw it, they wanted it, they started to use it, and we grew. It was like fuel on a haystack. It just flew out the door. So we didn't have to be experts in our world. We didn't have these terms like minimum viable product or product market fit or traction or all of these things that everybody's trying to kind of get their hands around to understand whether they have it or not. I think in some ways, if you've got it, you'll know you have it because it's so obvious. So for us, we had an app where at the time, When Is Good probably had about 100,000 people on it, but we had a handful of signups, of upgrades every month. And I think that in the first month of You Can Book Me, we had made more in customer subscriptions in that first month than we had done previously for the whole year of When Is Good subscriptions. It was that obvious. The minute that we launched You Can Book Me, and lots of businesses were paying for it and they wanted it and they wanted to talk about it and they wanted to give us all the feedback, all this incredible, natural, organic fuel that came from a tool like You Can Book Me because of it's a scheduling tool. This just washed over us. And so all work stopped on When Is Good that month. That was in 2011. And we basically didn't look back because we're bootstrapped, as you said. So we're bootstrapped. We were following the money. I'm sure in many different versions of that story, we would have had angel investors and VCs, and we could have pumped out both scheduling tools and whatever. There's lots of different versions of how we could have done it differently or better or grown faster or made more money. But really, at the end of the day, we bootstrapped it to a point where it is now. And it was because of that natural, organic, viral growth that got us there throughout those first 5-6 years when the company didn't make a profit. We just were making a loss, but we were able to fund what we were doing through customer upgrades, cash in advance, essentially, 12 and 24-month upgrades. That cash, so we were cash flow positive almost from the get-go. And then by being cash flow positive, we actually ran a loss for about 5 years, but we could live off the cash and keep reinvesting back into the tool. And we could only do that because of customers, because we're customer funded. So there wasn't a point where we were speculating inside You Can Book Me. We absolutely knew we had a winner. With When Is Good, that was a speculation, which in a sense we were like, well, you're not making any money. But the new siblings come along and they're so much better. So it wasn't a hard choice.
Makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting with that freemium model at the start, having that virality, and then obviously being self-funding from all of those customers. In similar periods of time that we've seen very recently, where a lot of businesses have taken on capital investors and overgrown, whereas you've done things from a very, I guess, sort of simple basis, right? Let's build the money and spend it. I think that's probably been very beneficial for you over those kind of periods of downturns.
Absolutely. I mean, COVID being a really good example of that. So our business was essentially hedged against that number of customers, those different sectors. We grew very organically across multiple segments. So we weren't dependent on one particular sector. We felt it. We had a lot of cancellations in small businesses because of COVID, which was very painful for them. And now recently we've experienced, a hit to some of our larger paying customers because they tended to come from software companies who are all making everybody redundant. So you can see these kind of troughs and peaks in other industries that are using online scheduling tools. And we are affected because we're still quite a small company. I mean, we're obviously not one of the biggest scheduling tools out there. So we do get affected by these waves. But at the same time, it doesn't knock us over because our foundations are incredibly strong in the tool that we have and in the thousands of people that use it. We're doing over 1 million bookings a month. One way or another, all of those users and customers are generating a big footprint of people using the product. And that becomes our foundation rather than any external factor, which is to do with, the VCs have put in 20 million and you now need to basically run to make gold. And if you don't make gold, then you lose the match. I mean, we might not be right now one of the medal winners, but we're finishing the match. We're in the game. We're basically, we're running the game. No, you can't knock us out of the game.
And when you think about the freemium model, and I think this is, maybe it's just from my experience, kind of like self-serve, product-led strategies within software, it's grown in popularity over the last few years.
Definitely.
And with everyone obviously always wants to move up market, expand those contracts, things like that. I mean, how do you see, not necessarily pricing structure, but just go-to-market strategies in general for both YouCanBookMe and in the macro over the next 5 to 10 years?
So we are we're almost 100% product-led growth. So we have never, ever had a salesperson formally working, which I know you're obviously this sales leader series. So this might be shocking.
This is good. It's good variant.
So how have we done it without sales? And actually the fact is that we just put our effort into deep engagement with our customers from the point that they make a booking, create an account, and then set up an account. And then our sales process does exist. It just happened over a longer period of time because it's product led. So we expect them to already have an experience of the product, to know what they want. And then we can talk to them about, what else is in the tool that they might need. And it generally gets led by customer success. So we have account management and customer success, which essentially replaces the upfront sales lead. That said, I think that, we've hit a sort of plateau in the growth curve where to get those higher paying customers and all the rest of it, we do need to do more sales. We do need to do more direct engagement, talking to people about cultivating what job it is that they're trying to get done, why YouCanBookMe could help, what we can do for larger teams. We have plenty of people who use YouCanBookMe who are using 200, 300, 400 licenses. So we absolutely have the capability and the product to do it. But the traditional sales and marketing foundation in a company that tends to acquire those kind of customers isn't in our company. What we have is the self-service product-led growth. So it's a little bit hit and miss. And it's one of the things I'm interested in and understanding more about is how we can move into some more sales-led process inside YouCanBookMe. I think we could do with it. I think it would be useful. I don't think we're going to I know that Atlassian tried to claim at 100 million a year that they didn't have any sales. And then people sort of see it as a badge of honor. But sales is not a bad thing because often companies don't know how to purchase without a salesperson. So it's like saying, oh, we don't have any, we only have emergency doctors. We don't have any consultants in the rest of the hospital. So basically you just crash through A&E, the doctors that are on site will sort you out. And then you expect to basically wander around the hospital and get better. So actually you do need to have that kind of consultant level understanding of what you want. Because if you're about to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on something, product led feels a bit like, really? I just, walk in and just try to figure out my own issues. So I think we recognize that tension inside YouCanBookMe because we don't just have a whole load of $10, $20 a month customers. We do have customers who pay us more. And to help support them from the very beginning, it's more appropriate, as far as I can see, for that kind of curated, sales-led onboarding conversation to happen at the beginning. But it's certainly not something inside our business model at the moment. But to answer your question, that's probably more likely. If we will be evolving that over time, over the next 5 years. As YouCanBookMe grows, we're inevitably going to be attracting customers who have that kind of demand. And therefore, to help support them from the very beginning, we would be more likely to move into a more sales-driven part of the business.
Now, this next question, Bridget, is something that I ask everyone that I have on this podcast. And it can be quite personal. So please go into as much detail as you would like. But thinking back throughout your journey building YouCanBookMe and just in software in general, what has been the toughest moment in your career? How have you dealt with it? And what advice would you give for other people, not necessarily to avoid the same pitfalls, but to better deal with those possibly inevitable pitfalls?
And I can say the hardest thing And the toughest times I've had where I felt it's really hard, and this is just hand on my heart, and this is the truth, is it when you're letting somebody go. It is just, it's just horrible. It just is never, never, never a fun thing to have a conversation with somebody and say, you're not right for this company. You obviously might be right for somebody else. You're going to hopefully go on to do much better things. But for this company, for what we're trying, the flip side of having a very strong culture and a very strong organizational belief about who we want to be and what we're doing and how we're building it and how we're growing is that there's going to be some people that join the organization that are just not quite the right fit for it on whatever criteria. And it's not necessarily a reflection on them. It could easily be just as much a reflection on us. And it's happened several times. You have to do it. If you're a leader inside an organization, you have to be really clear. You have to be fair. You have to communicate. And to let somebody go in circumstances that were beyond their control is an admission of failure. And I always take that in some ways the most serious, because you can also include in that when you're letting customers down as well, when you're actually having to face up to the fact that you promised somebody something and then you have to turn around and say, I can't deliver on what I promised. But that is ultimately what you do if you hire somebody and then in the end you say, I'm sorry, I know I promised you a job, but actually I can't give you this job anymore. And it's the same feeling that you get if you promise customers a whole lot of stuff or anything where you have mistakenly over promised. And I think with people in particular, when you're hiring somebody and then you're letting them go, it is, or they work for you and they resign because it's not what they thought it was and they go. That's when I get the kind of pit of my stomach feeling of like, I hate this. This is like, if you can tell when people say that they like to avoid conflict, or people avoid this kind of thing all the time because it's really hard. You don't want to interact with people at that level and have to deal with it. And it's always hard. We'll never get better. I try to avoid it by every time getting better at reviewing what was that job about? What were we expecting? Did we communicate properly? Were we being unfair? Was it beyond our control? Sometimes, people do behave in very odd ways that weren't consistent with what you thought they were going to do. But most of the time, it's a fit that I feel like I could have avoided had I not hired that person in the first place. So that's the hardest, Freddie. And it doesn't, that will never, I constantly learn from that. Everybody should learn from that. Don't hire somebody unless you're fairly sure you would understand the circumstances under which you would let them go, and therefore try to mitigate those reasons. Don't just say, oh, I'll give it a go and see how I feel, see if they work out, because you're dealing with somebody else's life and they're not a guinea pig for your company to work out whether you like that role or not, because you're using them. So you have to be honorable towards the people that choose to work for you. And I've made mistakes in the past where I still feel pain about it 5 years later, or I think about it. So it's a lot to do with the way it informs me about how I run YouCanBookMe.
I appreciate you expanding on that, Bridget. Great answer. Next question. Speaking to a lot of the people that I've had on this podcast in particular, and now obviously bear in mind, a lot of those individuals have had, or at least focused on, a more sales-led approach to sales. And so I'm very interested in hearing your take, not necessarily because you don't have that front end built out as much, but more so from that upselling and account-based CS side. And I think a lot of, say, upselling, or whether you're selling enterprise, mid-market on those large-scale contracts, this year had to have something around de-risking those deals, lowering the barrier to entry for those, especially if they are spending a ton of money with you, and creating consensus within those individuals within the buy team to make that much easier to bring on those new tools or expand that account outright. What are you doing today to get around this, specifically, I guess, for the CS and upselling side? And looking at YouCanBookMe's lifetime and what you've done over those 12 years, and then just a bit of a tangent, but what have you done to stand out for the crowd?
Tell you what, let's just do the second question first, because then it explains the first question. So the second question is, what do we do to stand out from the crowd? How are we different, over the many years? Now, YouCanBookMe is easy to explain what we do. We help people find a time people can meet. It's online scheduling. Everybody thinks that's obvious. And of course, we've got the HubSpots and Chili Piper and Calendly and all the rest of it. Like, there's loads of tools that do the same thing. So you'd think, oh, well, obviously, therefore, it must be the same. However, first of all, YouCanBookMe has come from a tradition where we invented a lot of that calendar grid style clicking and choosing. And secondly, we have a kind of a devotional approach to the problem that we're trying to solve. So to that, I mean, we keep on building tools that try to solve scheduling, but also we believe very much in the power of the booker experience. The actual experience of clicking and selecting a time should be as good as it possibly can be. So I don't know when this show is going to be published, but in the next sort of couple of months, as we are moving into the summer, YouCanBookMe is going to be showcasing some of the best and definitely very distinct features to do with a scheduling experience that promotes the booker experience, that promotes the one-to-one, booker to booker, person being booked versus person doing the booking. All of this stuff is what we call Booker is King. We are saying that the booker experience is the most important part of what we offer and what is distinctive about YouCanBookMe. And allied to that is what we currently have at the moment, which is we are the most customizable, we are the most language translatable ones. You can out of the box, you can create a YouCanBookMe booking page in Spanish and Portuguese and Japanese and French. And then all the other languages can be supported with just changing the English to the language that you want. And then you basically have white labeled, translated booking pages. So we know that many people around the world use YouCanBookMe because of our booking experience, because they can get translatable, customizable experiences. And we've just recently rolled out a new version of the app, which allows that even more. So we're just investing in more of those kind of features that we know people want. So that's all we've been doing. In the last couple of years, we've just come to the end of a very significant amount of investment in getting that new version of the Booker experience out, and then everything that's going to come out this summer. So going back to your question about how do we deal with customer relationships over time and how do we get people to renew, or how are we negotiating with it? In a sense, we have now a long-standing relationship with many, many thousands of customers where we have to bring them with us, because over 12 years, this is not the only time we've rolled out a new version of YouCanBookMe. So I met somebody recently in the spring, who has been a YouCanBookMe user for 8 years. So I could tell instantly when he signed up what the app looked like. It certainly doesn't look like that now. So if we just put to one side the kind of sort of immediate meteoric rise of a software tool where you're like, this is a Loom, or this is a Zoom, or this is Slack, or this is Intercom, and everybody's wowed by it and everybody piles on and you think, great. But these companies I've just mentioned have been around for a while, but the latest and greatest new CRM or video conferencing tool that you might want to use, it's been around for a year or 2 years. The team have a runway for another 12 months. They're desperately trying to get people on board. The salespeople are desperately trying to convince everybody they're solving a relevant problem. And you kind of believe that your product is like, it's sort of sitting in aspect that you're just, you're trying to flog today. Well, we've had that experience, but over 12 years, what you realize is you have to change. Change is the watchword of your product. You can't sell a product to a customer today and claim that in 2 years' time, it's going to be the same product, because you're always evolving. Our R&D is our biggest budget inside YouCanBookMe. And so our R&D budget is constantly pushing, engineering, change, and understanding of the problem we're trying to solve, to the point where you're always having that conversation with customers to say, well, I know that this is how it's always been for you and working this way, but now this is the new way. So you have to do a balance of responding to customers for what they want today. They want their bacon and eggs today, but tomorrow you're saying, no, we're all going vegetarian. You've just got to give up your bacon. And like, no, I like bacon. Like, no, you can't have bacon anymore because you're vegetarian now because of climate change. And you have to bring people with you. It's a kind of a cultural, political, social kind of conversation to say the product that you love now has to do this, because in terms of YouCanBookMe, we're looking at AI, we're looking at predictive scheduling, we're looking at shared availability, we're looking at a whole lot of stuff the tool needs to respond to. So you have to do a combination of building stuff that people didn't know that they wanted because you're inside the state of the art, what is headed next for the product, versus understanding and respecting and honoring the product that they paid for and want today, versus ensuring that there is a certain amount of business clarity about who you're building for. So inside scheduling, if we were not careful, we'd be building for your beauty therapists on the one hand, who have a very different set of requirements, and incredibly large corporate enterprise organizations. And I think that that would probably explain our success and also our lack of meteoric growth compared to other tools, because we have actually had a very wide range of customers. A lot of people have piled on, used YouCanBookMe for years, loves the tool, but it's prevented us from having that very definitive business plan where you're given £1 million, you're told to build a product, and then you go out there and you just sell to those customers. And it's very narrow focus. We're this kind of we have this wide range, spray and pray kind of business application of YouCanBookMe, of scheduling. Millions of people want to use YouCanBookMe. And so our job over the next 5 years is to actually narrow down our focus and our product to say we're for this. And we're already 90% of the way building. As I said, those features are coming out over the next couple of months, which are just absolutely sweet in terms of the tool we have. But then we also then have to say, and that's for this group of people. And so you have to be fair. So my advice about people having those kind of conversations, sales conversations, people thinking about spending a ton of money with you, there is no advantage to pretending that you're somebody that you're not. You have to say, this is our tool. This is who we're building for. This is what it's for. Let's try and understand your use case. What problems are you trying to solve? And then I will do my best to help, guide you to the best decision, which might not be using my tool. And I think with that kind of honesty, you then end up with a more honest and authentic conversation with the customers that do want to buy you, because you're presenting as a way that you genuinely have their best interests at heart and don't sell to people who don't really need your tool.
Fantastic answer, Bridget. I appreciate that. That was quite a heavily loaded question, multiple layers. So you answered that very well. That was a great answer. Final question. I know we're coming to time. This is a question from our previous guest, who is very well known on the LinkedIn space for specifically enterprise sales. It comes from Kristen Connor, and she asks you, what is the best advice you've ever received?
I think, and this is kind of weird because it's almost not advice. When we were 10, 12 years ago, we are bootstrapped, we're proudly bootstrapped, but we're not fanatical. We're not kind of judgmental about people who want to raise money and do whatever they want to do. And certainly in 2011, 2012, we had chats with investors, we talked to angels, and we eventually organized private loan and also an overdraft from the bank. And it's incredible to me now, given the fact that all the funding models out there are lending software companies money on the basis of their recurring revenue. We could not get a bank to take a look at us. We got 25 grand from the NatWest. It was just it was ridiculous. They just thought, well, you're not making up, who are you? We don't get this. We don't understand what this is. So we couldn't raise capital. And so as a result, we're having all these different conversations with people. And both the bank manager, actually, one of the bank managers, but then also one of the angels, said to me, as I was kind of trying to understand what we had and what should we do and, what was our situation, he said, if you can absolutely avoid it, don't sell bits of your business, which was funny coming from an angel investor, but basically saying, if you can avoid it, don't sell chunks of your business. And at the time, we could have probably sold 10% of our company for 150,000. We probably would have. Which would have meant that the angels would have made a very good investment, exactly what they would want to do. They would have definitely had a 10 times return on that. But his point was that if you as a founder, if you go for very early dilution, you'll be paying for that for the rest of your time. And it's their money, but it's not their effort or labor. It's your labor and effort. And then you're working 10 times as hard for their return as you are for your own return. So it puts you in this very asynchronous relationship with investors because you know that they're going to take the bulk of the bounty with them, and you've done all the work. Now, that might not be the case for some investors. It might be that the job that you're doing absolutely couldn't get off the road without investment. As I said, I'm not evangelical about bootstrapping at all. But that piece of advice, which is, it's your business, don't give it away. It's your decision. It's your relationship with customers. I've extrapolated from that over the years because I found myself now, because I do some mentoring with founders and I talk to people who are starting up, and I find myself saying, it's your business. You have to decide what it is that you want. So, I'm sitting here with a $5 million ARR business, not a $500 million ARR business. And in some ways, if you just follow the traditional formulaic assumption about that, we're small. We're a failure. We haven't launched because we're not going to go for an IPO any point soon. But if you look at it from my perspective, the way I run my business is literally, it's my business. It's like, it's how I wanted it to be. It's met my success criteria. It has been an amazing thing to be involved with for the last 10 years. I've met some incredible people. I've really enjoyed running the company. I love working with the customers that have helped fund that. And we've got what we wanted. And so I think that for anybody who is involved in a business or runs a business or owns a business, the piece of advice is to say, you have to hold on to your own sovereignty of choices about that. Because most of the time, if you've decided to run your own business, it's because you are pretty opinionated about what it is that you think is the right thing to do. And you can't just run your business on the basis of everybody else's advice. So I've just turned that around now for your previous interview. Like don't take other people's advice. Stick to your own advice. It's your business.
Love it. Bridget, they're all the questions that I had for you today. I really appreciate you joining me today. Fantastic answers. For any of those individuals, salespeople, business owners listening, we're going to have some links in the descriptions from wherever you're listening or watching this for Bridget, YouCanBookMe, and all of that other good stuff. Bridget, before we wrap up, is there any parting final words other than the advice that you've just given the audience to wrap up with?
That was my speech. No second speeches.
Fantastic. Really appreciate it, Bridget. And for all those listening, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.